righty-ho, RTO even. Hope you are all well and had a great weekend. So today is the first in the series of that Sammy Hagar story. So we start with Ronnie's first band, which was Montrose. They were formed in 1973 and named after the guitarist and founder Ronnie Montrose. Obviously the original lineup did feature Sammy Hagar. He made 2 albums with them, and then they made 3 others with a couple of other singers. You know, Bill Church was in the band at the beginning, Denny Kamasi on drums, Jim Alcavar on played keyboards. So there's been a mixture of people. They were around for 5 albums, and we're going to have a look at all the albums, because we don't just do the ones Sammy was in. So we're going to have a look at their complete albums. So coming in at number 5, we get a 1976, and it's the 4th album, and it's Jump on It. It's the second Montrose album that featured Bob James and keyboardist Jim Alcavar. The album featured Randy Joe Hobbs on bass, and the remainder of the parts were played by Jim Alcavar. And there was no bassist on the Jump on It tour, apparently. So we have got Bob James on vocals, Ronnie Montrose on guitars, Jim Alcavar on keyboards, Denny Kamasi on drums, and as I said, we've got Randy Joe Hobbs on some of the bass work. Okay, the first track on here is called Let's Go. I love this track. It is the best track on the album. I love the drumming from Denny Kamasi on this, and of course Ronnie Montrose is a really good guitar player, and it's pretty good. It just one of them tracks that actually sounds proper, as they say. So I don't mind that one. Okay, what are you waiting for? This is a little bit weak for me. It's sort of in between a rock and a pop track, and it doesn't do much for me. Tough Sedge is the next track. Really good. I like this. It's an instrumental, and it's got some really good guitar work from Ronnie Montrose on this. Terrific guitar player was Ronnie. Music man, very radio friendly. I don't know if they were trying to be Boston or Journey, but it didn't sound right. Jump on It. This sounds like a classic Montrose song. Bob's James is singing. He's pretty good on this. He's sort of in the same vein as Sammy, but I think Sammy would have probably sung that a lot better. Rich Man. This one's okay. Some great guitar work from Ronnie. The keyboard sound is good on this from Jim, and the vocal I'm not quite like. Crazy for You. This is not our one from Montrose. This is just too poppy. Merry Go Round, one of the better tracks on the album. Great playing from the band, and it's not a bad vocal from Bob James. This is a bit of a mixed bag for me. It's got some good tracks that really sounded like classic Montrose, but a lot of experimentation, and some of it didn't work. It didn't really cut the mustard with me. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 6 out of 10. Okay, then coming in at number 4, we got a 1975 now, and it's Warner Brothers Presents Montrose. This is the 3rd album, and it was the first album after the departure of Sammy Hagar, and it's the first not to be produced by Ted Templeman. First, obviously, for Bob James and Jim Alcavar. So we got Bob James on vocals, Ronnie Montrose on guitars, Jim Kavar on keyboards, Alan Fitzgerald on bass, and Denny Kamasi on the drums. First track on here is Matriarch. Really good track. It's got a great riff on this from Ronnie, and Bob James's vocals are pretty good on that. All I Need, not keen on this. It's a little bit wishy-washy for me, not very rock to me. Then we have a covers track. They do a version of Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock. That's not a bad version of it. Then we get Whaler, a song that tends to meander. That's got a nice bass line in it though, but the vocal is not very good at all. Then we get Dancing Feet. Now this is more like Montrose. This is the Montrose sound that I like. Great guitar work as ever from Ronnie, and even the singing from Bob James is pretty good. Then we get another cover of Oh Lucky Man. This is a song from Alan Price that was released in 1973. I like the track anyway, and they don't do a bad version of it. One and a Half is the next track. This is a little guitar piece from Ronnie. It's pretty good, showing off his guitar skills. Clown Woman. I like this track. It's got a good old-fashioned rap rock riff to this. Really, really good. Black Train. This is a nice little rocker. This is. The drumming from Denny is great. He is a really good drummer. I love Ronnie's guitar on this. It's an excellent track and a good way to end the album. I think this is Bob James's better album. It's a little bit more rocky. It hasn't gone too far off what Montrose were before. I don't mind listening to this one, so I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Okay, then coming in at number 3, we have the 5th and final album, released in 1987, and it is called Mean. According to what Ronnie Montrose at the time, singer Johnny Edwards and drummer James Kotak, who went on to obviously play with Scorpions, were still officially in a band called Buster Brown, so he sort of poached them for this. So on here we've got Johnny Edwards on the vocals, Ronnie Montrose on guitars, Glenn Lecht on the bass, and James Kotak on the drums. Okay, the first track is called Don't Damage the Rock. This is a great rocker here. Johnny Edwards is a really good singer. Great drumming from James Kotak. We know his calibre. He went on to drum with the Mighty Scorpions. Really is good. Then we get a cover version of Game of Love by Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders. It's actually not a bad version of it. Great riff from Ronnie on that. Really is a good track. Pass It On. Now this harks back to the classic days of Montrose. Great riff here. Again, Johnny Edwards sings a great vocal. Very strong and powerful. Excellent track that is. Hard-Headed Woman. Another really good solid rock track. Like that track as well. M for Machine. Great bass line on this from Glenn. Really strong, and another great guitar work from Ronnie. I do love that track. Then we get my favourite track on the album, Ready, Willing and Able. Great rocker. This sounds so much like a Sammy track. Sort of thing Sammy would have been great singing. It's an absolute belter of a track. Man of the Hour. This track rocks. Again, I love the chugging guitar riff with a great drum from James. Excellent track. Flesh and Blood. This is a nice little slow sort of rocker. And then you get a great vocal from Johnny Edwards. Stand is the final track on this. Probably my least favourite track on here. It just lacks something. I just don't know. I think this is a cracking album. I think Johnny Edwards did a great job. He sounds more like Sammy than Bob James. And for their last album, which I think is a really good way to go out. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.5. Okay, now we're in the top two, so it's obviously the two albums that Mr. Hagar sang on. To me, these are always going to be the classic albums. 1 and 2, I like these equally, actually. So it was very hard, but in the end, we went this way. So coming in at number 2, we have that debut album from Montrose, self-titled, released in 1973. So we've got Sammy Hagar on the vocals, Ronnie Montrose on lead guitar, Bill Church on the bass, and Denny Kamasi on the drums. Opens up with the brilliant Rock the Nation, classic track from Ron Montrose. Sammy's vocal is absolutely storming on this, absolutely great track. Bad Motor Scooter, another classic track. Love Sammy's vocals on this, the riffs and Ronnie are brilliant on that track. Space Station number 5 starts off with lots of weird noises and an acoustic guitar, and you think, what's going on here? A little bit proggy space rock, and then you get an almighty rock guitar riff, and it's brilliant. I Don't Want It, that opening riff is just brilliant, and you get great, Sammy's voice comes in, he's got a really good voice, great singer. Stonking track, great little rocker. Good Rocking Tonight, they just keep coming, don't they, these tracks on this album. Ronnie's guitar solo is brilliant, Sammy's vocals are dynamite, Denny's drummings are belting, it's really good. Rock Candy, this is my favourite track on there, it's one of my favourite tracks by Montrose as well. Denny's drumming, his bass drum on this is tremendous, and it builds up with that bass line from Mr. Church, and then you get Sammy and Ronnie coming in. It's just a great track. One Thing on My Mind, another great track. They're all great tracks on this album. A great guitar work again, and Sammy is just on fire as usual. Make It Last, the last track, great vocal, great riffs, and a great guitar solo on this one as well. Great way to win the album. As I said, solid album, top to bottom with great tracks. Great debut album. Play this a ton. I just love this album. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at number 1 then. From 1974, the second album, Paper Money. It was the first album that Alan Fitzgerald played on, who replaced the original bass player Bill Church. So we got Sammy Hagar, Ronnie Montrose, Alan Fitzgerald on the bass, Denny Kamasi. Okay, the first track is a cover version called Underground. It was by Chunky and Navova and Ernie. This version is much better. Their version is a little bit more of a slower song, but this is a great rock track. Love their version of it, it's absolute belter. Then we get another cover, Connection, obviously, from the Rolling Stones. A great cover of the song off Push the Buttons. Of course, they do it justice, and it's a really good version. Probably one of the better versions of a Rolling Stones track I have heard. Then we get The Dreamer, classic Ronnie Montrose opening riff here, and then you get the absolute belting vocal from Sammy, absolutely brilliant. Then we get a little instrumental called Starliner. Great guitar work here, I love this track. Of course, then we do get my favourite track by Montrose, I Got the Fire. Love the riffs on this. It is brilliant. It's got a hooky riff on this. Of course, Iron Maiden did a cover of this as a B-side back in the 80s, I think. And they did a good version of it as well, but I do love this track. It is my favourite all-time Montrose track. Spade Age, Sacrifice, great bluesy riffs here. Another fine performance from Sammy. You would get that later in his career, of course. We're Going Home. Again, it's just absolutely belter track. Great vocal from Ronnie Montrose on this. He sings. It's a little bit different, and I like it. Paper Money, the title track, of course, classic track. Love Denny's drumming on this. Brilliant bass line from Alan Fitzgerald, and it's a brilliant way to end the album. Okay, it's got a couple of covers on it, but when you listen to them, you wouldn't think they were covers, because the way that they're played is absolutely brilliant. I think this is probably Sammy's best vocal. The two albums he made, his vocals on this were the best, and I think also this has got some of Ronnie Montrose's best guitar work. I love this album from top to bottom. I play this a lot, but both Montrose and Paper Money, they are brilliant albums, but this one just gets the edge for number one, because I think the playing on here is a lot better, and Ronnie's guitar solos are brilliant, but Sammy's vocals are just absolutely on fire on this album. And so I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8.5. So that's part one. Next week, part two, which of course is Van Halen. We're going to rank the lot though, don't worry. So it'll be a full album ranking of Van Halen. I'll be back later though with the classic album this week, and this is one back from the 70s. It's Elvis Costello and the Attractions, and the really good album This Year's Model. Just before we go though, I said on Friday that I was going to see a AC/DC tribute band called Let There Be DC. They were brilliant. All I can say. They opened up with Are You Ready, which is the video I was in, and they did songs, a good mixture of songs from Bond's days and of course Brian's, and they played a lot of tracks that I'd never even heard AC/DC do. So it was a terrific gig. My ears were ringing until yesterday, but I put that down to me getting old and not used to standing next to speakers in pubs. So check them out. They're called it's LBT/DC. Let There Be DC. So go and check them out if you like AC/DC. Okay, I'll be back later to do some classic album looking at. So bye for now.